What's happening, my fellow geeks and geekettes? Welcome to a brand new, very exciting episode of Chris's Custom Collectibles. And today, in honor of the upcoming film The Flash, because Keaton is returning as Batman, we're going to be doing a wall-mountable Batwing diorama that is going to emulate that beautiful shot from Batman 89 when the Batwing goes in front of the moon and drops back down towards Gotham to take on Jack Nicholson's The Joker. So we're actually going to be utilizing a desk lamp, a Batwing desk lamp that is currently on special at JB Hi-Fi. We're then going to be mounting it on a board. I'm going to be sculpting the backdrop of the moon that's going to be LED lit, and I have all these ideas going on in my head. But first things first, we probably should go buy the Batwing, shouldn't we? Okay. Okay, alright, we're back. So we have a detailed 1:50 scale replica of the Batwing. Obviously, we've got to take this off the lamp stand here, but let's unbox it and check it out first of all, and then we can get a good idea of how we're going to scale the moon to go behind this piece. Cardi board! I don't have it. See, they are useful. Okay, so there you go. There is the Batwing so far. We've got to do a bit of detailing work, but this gives me an overall good idea of how we're going to be scaling the moon itself. It's lightweight, but also very detailed at the same time. Hang on, I'll extend it out and show you guys. Look at that. So, the next step is to dismantle it from the actual hinges here, so we still have the wire running out of it, and then we can start scaling and stenciling out our moon. We're then going to get some Monster Maker's clay, melt it down, pour it in a little quick and easy mold, and then when it's set, we can get to sculpting our moon. So with that being said, let's get to it. Okay, now that we've dismantled the Batwing, but the cool thing is I had the idea of illuminating the moon casting when it's all cast in resin with one of these LED lights here, these ring lights you can get from Kmart, and it's the perfect circumference for the size of the moon. So this is going to be my template. I'm going to trace around here, probably just go a bit more outwards of the perimeter, just so it's not right on the edge, but we'll see how we go. So I'm going to trace around here. We're then going to build up a wall. So essentially we're going to make a cake tin and then pour in some liquid Monster Maker's clay. Now we've got some pre-cut strips of board here that are going to act as our wall here to pour our liquid clay in. So we're just going to super glue these down to get them in place. I've got to obviously fill in the remaining part here with this extra piece, and then we're going to hot glue everything together just to secure everything and seal everything up. What I have here is some medium strength Monster Maker's clay that I've thrown in the microwave for 2 minutes, so it's nice and soft. And we're going to pop it in this saucepan here. Now I got this from Kmart for $5. I don't want to ruin the good saucepan or cookware. We're going to keep it on a low heat and get it down to a nice liquid consistency. And then we can pour it in our little makeshift cake tin. Alright, so I let the clay sit in the fridge for about 2 hours and it's dry. The only thing is, it didn't stick to the board. And that's because I sprayed a release spray just to make sure that the actual wall itself would come off, but also it's come off the board, which is fine. It actually works in our favor. So what I'm gonna do is just pull this off like so, then very carefully lift this off, and we have our clay plate. So I'm going to clay glue this down to some MDF because MDF is a lot more porous. Just means heating up some more clay, putting it on here, and then setting it on the MDF. And then we can get to carving and rounding out the actual moon shape and doing all the moon details like craters and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm shitty commentary. So as you can see right here, I'm melting down some more clay just so it's going to soak into that porous MDF board. as opposed to not sticking to the original cardboard that I had there, and it definitely stuck like shit to a blanket. I just brushed a little bit more around the perimeter just to properly seal it in. And then I popped that board onto a Lazy Susan, and no joke, Geeks and Geekettes, this was the most therapeutic, cathartic thing I've ever done. Just rolling this thing around on a Lazy Susan, trying to get that beautiful hubcap shape, just a round shape, our basic shape of the moon. And then I'm going around the perimeter like so, and sculpting outwards. And then we're gonna go in and sculpt our craters. Now, I was obviously using reference of the actual moon, and it's one of those things where you kind of just have to wing it, per se. So you just kind of outline your craters and stuff like that, and also the abrupt kind of drops and bumps and stuff like that that are on the surface of the moon. Because keep in mind, when we paint it and dry brush it, it's going to pick up. Now, I got a brush and hit the actual clay with a hairdryer, and then I was able to indent with the brush there some nice texture. I'm just getting some talcum powder and talking the entire piece, and this kind of just helps to seal it, as well as spraying a seal on at the same time. So the exact same method that we use for doing the initial cake tin border, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the actual sculpt. Now, the silicone I'm going to be using is from Dalcam, and this is spare silicone I had left over from the Wolverine cosplay for the belt buckle. So again, much like Barnes Pinky Seal, mix ratio, 100 to 100, mix that shit up. This is a clear drying silicone, so it's kind of very deceiving, and I'm not used to it because I'm usually used to pink Pinky Seal. But I had to do 2 batches because there was a lot of silicone required for this one. But I let it dry over the night. It takes a little bit longer to dry. Very carefully peel that away, and we're left with that beautiful mold as you see right there. So for the casting itself, I'm using the Prototype clear casting embedding resin. We've got our hardener there, and also a little bit of white tint, like a couple of drops. So you can pour in as much as you want, and I went a little bit ham with the hardener because it was a little bit cooler today. Put in a good couple of drops. Obviously I put 1 in there. I think all up I put about 12 drops of white tint in, and I actually had to do 2 batches. I kind of under measured per se. So I spread that out and then did the next batch, and because I put so much hardener in, the casting actually kind of shrunk, so it kind of released itself. So I'm just pulling apart the ring light, as you see right there, just taking the wire out, just making sure it's going to light up. As you can see right there, it's got an initial just ring around the casting, but when we start to paint it, it's actually going to fill it out, which kind of sounds weird, but trust me on the process. So I'm just going to grab a white and a black acrylic paint and mix them together, because from looking at reference photos of the moon from like NASA and stuff like that, and from Google obviously, you have to start with a darker shade, a darker base shade, and then build up your lighter shades. So that just essentially means adding more white acrylic to the dark mix that I initially mixed up in the previous footage you saw right there. And essentially it's just like dry brushing. You're consistently dry brushing a lighter shade. You go lighter, lighter, lighter until you have all these beautiful shades and layers, and it will make sense later on when it's all lit up. Now, in terms of actually customizing the Batwing, no joke, we're just using some silver leaf rub and buff just to dry brush over the entire surface. When you look at the screen used maquette of the Batwing from Batman 89, it's pretty plain looking. It just looks like there's just a lot of dry brushing going on. It's got some silver showing through and stuff like that. And honestly, this took about 5 minutes to do, and we're done and dusted. So it's kind of ironic. It's supposed to be a Batwing custom collectible, but this took the least amount of time to do. Now for the actual board, I'm just using a cheap frame from Kmart. This cost me 25 Australian dollars, and I wanted it because obviously we have an MDF backing board, but also we have a frame to utilize instead of building a frame. So I'm just getting that MDF and spraying it with a Rust-Oleum matte black, and we've got our ring light, and I'm just soldering it as best as possible. And I obviously drilled some holes there just to thread the wire through that included the LED sensor. Now I'm getting some white backing board that is going to be inside the actual ring light. That is going to help reflect the light in the casting. That's going to help it illuminate a lot more light as opposed just to the matte black there. Now I'm using some E6000 here and gluing the actual ring light down in place, and give it about half an hour to really properly set. And I use E6000 on all of the layers. So I'm obviously using the E6000 to actually glue the board down because I just don't want it going anywhere. This is going to be on a vertical surface. I don't want any of these pieces, you know, having to slip off, fall off, anything like that. There's no cheap and nasty super glue this time around. Cheap and nasty super glue definitely has a place, but in this instance, no. So I'm just drilling
drilling out the holes here for the actual Batwing to mount onto the actual moon casting. I'm just using some hobby aluminum piping, just some very thin aluminum piping. I don't need anything too heavy duty because the Batwing itself is pretty light. Now, if you're wondering why I'm not utilizing the actual LED light from the Batwing, it was so weak. It couldn't illuminate shit. I'm actually worried like how little it illuminated. It was very weird. Now, for the actual stuffing and the actual cloud look, I'm using hobby stuffing and some hairspray, some VO5 hairspray, which is amazing and just works absolute wonders when you're utilizing it on a stuffing like this, because you look at the clouds in Batman 89 from that particular shot we're emulating, it's all very streaky. Now, once that was drying, I grabbed myself some spray adhesive, some Sika spray adhesive, and just sprayed on the area where I want the actual stuffing to be laid down, and just laid it down piece by piece, but also sprayed a bit of contact adhesive on the stuffing itself, and just sporadically and strategically at the same time place the stuffing down just to make it look as streaky as possible, and then also grab some Rust-Oleum matte black and spritzed it over the stuffing, and it gave us a nice shaded look, which worked an absolute treat.
Okay, here we are with the frame. So there was a bit of R&D, a couple of mistakes, and unfortunately I didn't video the entire process, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So originally, I was gonna add some rub and buff, some silver leaf rub and buff over the entire thing, and then I changed my mind because the rub and buff literally just wiped straight off. I was buffing it with a paper towel, and then it just decided to wipe off. So I got some steel wool, scoured everything back, and then I thought, let's go for a rust effect. You know, pay tribute to Anton Furst and his production design of Gotham. So I went ahead and did the rust effect with this footage that you see right here, dabbing it on. I sprayed it in a cup, dabbed it on with a brush, and it just looked too brown. It just looked like wood. It just looked like a wooden frame, and it looked plain, but it still had a nice texture. So I kept the rust on, and then grabbed the Dulux Duramax Gold and misted that over the rust effect so we can pay tribute to that beautiful utility belt, that beautiful yellow, and then eventually the goldish looking in Batman Returns utility belt that Keaton's Batman sports. So I think this is just gonna break up the monotony of how dark the rest of the piece is. So with that being said, what we're gonna do next, we're gonna finish this piece up by putting the backing board in place, screwing it, locking it in place. We're then gonna glue the actual moon and the Batwing down to the LED light rig, and then we're gonna call it a day. There we go, Geeks and Geekettes. The Batman Batwing 89 diorama is done and dusted. Let's try it on. How good is that? And the cool thing is, this is an RBG, so you have a variation of colors, simple in its execution, and when it's off, it looks a little bit plain. It looks like it's resting against a Batcave wall, but upon turning it on, it's pretty damn close to the screenshot from the film. So I'm very over the moon with how this has turned out, you know, utilizing a cheap frame from Kmart. We also have a ring light from Kmart. We have the Batwing desk lamp from JB Hi-Fi. So a kit bashing job at its finest. Now, of course, the best way to truly see the effect of the LED is in a lower light. And I do love the way that the ring light reflects off the stuffing here that's emulating the clouds. It just worked out so perfectly and yet so simple in its execution. Now, upon recording this particular footage, you wouldn't believe it, because originally I was going to be using the Batwing toy from The Flash. It's an updated design, sort of different to this one, but a little bit more hard edge and a little bit of a different shape in terms of the bat silhouette. But because that thing is so much bigger, the diorama itself would have been huge. That's why I settled for the desk lamp. But upon filming this footage, a TV spot for The Flash was released with this shot right here. You can't pick it. Guys, wherever you are in the world, please have yourselves an absolute cracker of a day. I hope you're well, hope you're happy, be merry, be silly. And until next time, Geeks and Geekettes, please always remember, cosplayers do it best.